to a special bonus episode of Cinemaholics. That's right, this is a last call, which is when we set some time apart from the main show to talk about a film that we couldn't fit into our normal programming. Now, this is a first for us, though, because we're doing this last call before we do our main episode, simply because it's the only time we can do it before everyone forgets the fever dream film that is, was, and forever will be Serenity. As always, I am your host, John Negroni, and with me I have my co-captain for Cinemaholics, Will Ashton.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more in line with Matthew McConaughey in this movie in that I've had a few drinks, in that I feel like everyone else in this podcast hasn't had a few drinks so far, but we'll see how things go as things go on.
Either way, ahoy, Will Ashton. I would
Ahoy.
gladly be your Jaimin Hansu, if that's what you would prefer.
Sure, yeah, I'm catching that fish named Justice no matter what, right?
That's right, and I'm going to deliver you from temptation, because I already was, planning on it, so.
Mm-hmm.
We have a special guest this week. He writes about film and pop culture for comicbook.com. Welcome to Cinemaholics for the first time, Charlie Ridgely.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. I'm happy to be here. I guess I'm Diane Lane in the scenario.
I was hoping you would say that. We wouldn't have to.
I mean, the other option is spoiler territory, so I guess for now that qualifies.
Actually, I was going to say the cat.
Diane Lane.
The black cat, I thought was,
Oh, yeah. Or,
right.
Yeah, I mean, Black Cat, yeah. Or Anne Hathaway, I guess. But
I'll take anyone from Serenity. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, besides Charlie taking our sloppy seconds, we are very excited to talk about Serenity on this episode because we did a Patreon poll for our most recent episode of Cinemaholics. We asked you what we should talk about, and Serenity was in a tie with Fire Festival. So we're going to be talking about the Fire documentaries on our main show. You can find that elsewhere on the feed. By the time you're listening to this, it'll be up shortly if you don't see it. But we after actually seeing this movie on Thursday night, I made the executive decision. I called Will Ashton up at 2:30 a.m. Sure. Will Ashton showed up in my trailer, calling himself The Rules for some reason.
Exactly, yeah.
And said, it will be a drunk episode. A drunk episode of Cinemaholics.
I don't think that's out of character for me, but for this episode, it was actually pretty fitting.
That's right. So we are all drinking. So before we talk about the movie, I want to know from you gentlemen, starting with you, Will Ashton, what are you drinking right now?
Mostly vodka. I feel like that's only fitting, but I would drink
rum. Why would it be fitting
on hand?
Wait, why is vodka fitting for you?
Oh, that's just my drink of choice. But I was gonna say, if I had rum on hand, I would be splurging at that if I could.
Oh man, I do have some rum, but I just was not in the mood for it tonight. I'm drinking Maker's Mark whiskey, so my drink of choice when it comes to Cinemaholics, probably. And what about you, Charlie Ridgely?
I'm doing kind of I guess I'm on brand tonight because I had some Eagle Rare bourbon. It's one of my favorite bourbons, and I live in Tennessee, so it's a big bourbon area here. But I had a couple of shots of bourbon before I started, and I'm just I'm on beer right now and kind of progressing a little bit. And I'm drinking National Bohemian, or Natty Bo, as they call it in Baltimore, where I'm from. It's a Baltimore staple. And so I brought some back to Nashville with me, and I'm just having a little taste of home.
Can I ask what brought you from Baltimore to Nashville?
Oh, my wife.
Okay.
We both went to school in East Tennessee, and we met, and I moved home for a little while. And then when I was like, I'm going to propose to this woman, I should move there. Wow. She had the steadier job. I wasn't writing full time yet. I was actually working at REI, and I was able to transfer to the store in Nashville. So I moved down here in 2015, I guess. And yeah, so I got a little taste of Tennessee, a little taste of Baltimore. I'm rocking and rolling. Yeah,
I mean, I've been in Nashville. It's a lovely city. I just know a lot of people in our business usually go for like, oh, I was in this city and then I moved to New York or LA.
Oh,
it's just like, it's unheard of usually for people to go from like City to Nashville. So I was curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, Will Ashton, obviously he loves country music and the Grand Ole Opry.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I didn't know when I moved, so I wasn't working in the industry when I moved. And then when I moved here, I met Brandon Davis, who works for comicbook.com, and he comic books based in Nashville. I had no idea.
I didn't know that.
And so I kind of stumbled into that after I moved here. And the reason I haven't moved to it in New York or LA is because, I found kind of a home with comic book here in Nashville.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this before the show, but you actually know our good friend Corey Woodruff, who was on our Kid Who Would Be King, the last call that we did. And you saw Serenity at the same time. Corey, you walked out of the theater and said hello to Corey Woodruff. Worlds colliding. I love it.
Oh yeah. Corey, I've been talking for a few months now. We joined the same critics association. They launched a critics association here in Nashville, the Music City Film Critics Association, last year, and so I've been kind of getting to know some more Nashville-based critics the last couple of years. And Corey and I have kind of become good buddies. We're two of the only younger ones in the group so far, so we've kind of got to know one another a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to find more San Francisco film critic friends. I've got one or two. One of them I saw Lego Movie, but literally she told me she was going to be there, but I didn't see her when I got to the theater, and she literally sat right behind me and never said hello. But she did say, she texted me later on and was like, "Oh yeah, I thought about throwing popcorn at you, but I thought I'd get in trouble." I'm like, wow. So film critics, we definitely, this industry isn't where you make friends, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I was gonna say, I mean, Julia is in the same city as me, but we've never met in person, so that goes to show, I guess. Pittsburgh
is a big place, but so Serenity. I want to know from you guys, first of all, I'm very curious about, because I mean, Charlie, you sort of brought this up, the way that you sort of heard that this is a movie you should actually go see in the theater. Will, Ash, and Charlie, well, I'll start with you, Will. Did you watch the trailer first, or did you go into this completely blind?
I didn't go completely blind. I saw the trailer at some point. I forget when. I feel like I saw it in the summer, but maybe that's my mind tricking me because this movie is so much about beaches and like exotic locations that my mind.
Well, there is like, the Beach Bum, which is Matthew McConaughey.
No, but I feel like, because I know for a fact this movie was supposed to come out in September.
September, October, something.
Yeah, it was supposed to come out in September. Then they pushed it to October. Then they're like, no, we'll put it in January, which always is a sign of confidence. You know?
Right.
But no, I feel like I saw this trailer either in late spring or early September, but I don't remember it too well beyond like one or two scenes in the film.
And what about you, Charlie?
Yeah, it was the same. I mean, I've seen it a couple times. I think it's been attached to a couple movies in the theater that I've seen. Like last year, and then also a little bit early this year, like late last year, whatever. And it felt very okay, whatever. It's a thriller. I like the actors, but I don't think this is going to be very good. I'm not going to care about it. Whatever. I kind of just put it out of my mind after seeing the trailer.
Okay, yeah, I did not watch the trailer for this. I really didn't know much about it. In fact, I avoided the trailer because I was doing, I do one of the columns I do for Atom Tickets, or Atom Insider rather, is a what's coming out this weekend. And I had to bring up information for Serenity, and so I was like, I guess I should watch the trailer. But then I had this nagging feeling that I was like, I think I might actually see this. I don't want to watch the trailer. This feels like, if it's a really bad movie, I don't want to see the trailer because, maybe if I go into it completely blind, I'll get something out of it that I wasn't expecting.
Let's give the movie a little bit of credit, right? Like, the movie has 2 Oscar winners at the front.
But this was earlier in the week.
Now that
the buzz was terrible.
I'm going to give this movie a lot of credit.
Oh, no. Okay.
Sorry, John.
We'll get to that. So I didn't watch the trailer at all. The only thing I knew was like half of the synopsis so that I could write about it very briefly. All I knew was that it's about a fishing boat captain played by Matthew McConaughey.
Of course.
Right. Whose ex-wife, played by Anne Hathaway, approaches him and asks him to murder her abusive new husband, played by Jason Clarke. And that's it. That's all I knew. And I knew Stephen Knight, directed it. And I was like, oh, the guy who did Locke. That was a pretty good movie. And like,
Locke is great.
Yeah, Tom Hardy, really, really solid film. One of those. It's the film that I wish Buried had been. I know a lot of people like Buried, but not me.
I feel like I don't know what accent. Do you guys remember what accent he did in Buried?
No, I think it was just American, wasn't it? Although it was probably British.
No,
because I remember Olivia Colman was one of the voices on his cell phone, right?
I forget. Yeah, there's a lot of famous people on the phone.
Yeah,
but I just remember I love doing. I don't think it was American. It wasn't British either, but I forget what accent it was. So I'm not going to presume what it was. But I just remember throughout the movie, he was just like, the trolley's okay. I just remember like throughout the movie, he just did that like several times, like at least 7 or 8 times. Just like, the trolley's okay. And I just remember doing that throughout the movie. So that's the only thing I really remember from Locke exactly. But I do know that movie was good. Very good, in fact.
It was good. I think it was a little bit more memorable than you're letting on, but regardless,
Yeah.
that was everything I knew about this one. And I also want to know what your audiences were like. I went into mine and I saw this movie alone, and I'm sad about that. Like, this is the kind of movie I wish Maverick Hines had, had been
Same here.
around. I can't imagine what that would have been like because I literally this movie is one of those movies where I'm looking around and I'm like I'm trying to find out. And we should say we're not doing spoilers right now. We're going to spoil the film later, but we're going to give a huge spoiler warning. So for now, keep on listening if if you want to be careful with spoilers. We're not going to give anything away. But during this movie, I kind of was like looking around, kind of being like, "What's going on?" Like Jim to the camera in the office, and there was maybe like 30 people in my theater. What about you, Will?
Yeah, it was definitely more than I anticipated. I remember that distinctly because I went in, I was expecting like 4 people, like exactly like 4 to 6 people. It was like 15 to 30. I just remember like doing that. I don't know if you guys know like that turn when you like go past the aisle to like see the seats. I just remember like it was like way more people than I expected. I was like, okay, yeah, we're doing this. We're seeing Serenity together. And it was like at least like 15 to 30 people. So I'd say like 25.
Yeah. I had probably 30 to 40, honestly, in my theater. Maybe 30. 30 is probably a good number, but I don't think it was quite as high as 40. But yeah, I saw it with a couple of friends. Actually, a friend and his girlfriend who I just met that night. I wasn't sure how she was going to be about movies because I had never met her. She was great though. She was great. And then Corey and his buddy were there, and I found that out when I got in the theater. He yelled at me, and I saw him up in the corner, and we talked a little bit. And I actually heard them laugh a couple of times during the movie out loud. I could pick out their voices back behind me.
How can you not though?
Right. Oh no, it was great, and my row was pretty full. So like I had a dude I didn't know on the other side of me who had a really great reaction after the movie that I'll talk about later. And we made a new friend, a new film Twitter friend was like 2 down from me because after the movie we were talking about it. This woman was kind of listening to us. And I'm like, what did you think? And she's like, oh, I saw this stuff on film Twitter before. I'm like, oh, you're one of us. This is great. And then she mentioned Letterboxd at one point without being prompted. I'm like, okay, cool. I know I can talk to you about stuff. This is fine.
Yeah. John, what was your audience reaction? Because I want to share mine briefly.
Well, first of all, I do want to say, I was sitting, I got my seat, like center of the theater with the railing so I can put my feet up, right? And nobody was around me, and I got there 10 minutes early, like I do. And these 2 guys they come into my row. They didn't have to. They didn't have to sit right next to me. They didn't. They could have very easily still have been in like toward the center with like a little bit of a buffer seat because I don't know you. And there's nobody on my right side. But so like to sit on my left side with no one on my right side, this is uncomfortable. And of course the guy is like edging into my seat. He was like up on my cup holder. I had to move my drink. And it was just telling for the movie ahead. He also took out his cell phone a bunch of times. So that was a crisis. But aside from that, the audience was placid, and it's funny. It's funny because we mentioned this before we recorded. I saw a Lego Movie today, and that friend of mine I told you about, she was sitting behind me during Lego Movie. She also was sitting behind me during Serenity. And she does that. She doesn't tell me when she goes and sees things, and then we don't realize we're in the same theater until like the next day. But literally, like, she was asking me after the movie, she was like, oh, you were in Serenity. Why wasn't anybody laughing? Because, like, she was kind of like me wondering, like, what was going on with our audience. Because, like, I was laughing, for sure. Not loudly or anything, but I was just sort of like, what is going on? Why is this happening? But, like, everyone in the theater was just mean mugging this film, it felt like. Or at least just, like, very focused and taking it very seriously. And I'm very curious about that. Will Ashton, I want to let's give this a little bit more of a plot synopsis. We've sort of given the broad strokes, but how would you describe this film from Stephen Knight, and what do you make of it at this point?
The plot synopsis? Oh my goodness. I'll describe it as best I can from like a general's place, which is from the Wikipedia page, which is the film takes place on a fishing island. Fisherman Baker Diller receives strange visions. Baker Diller. What was it?
You said Baker
Did I
Diller.
mess up this name?
It's fine.
Sorry.
I like it better. It sounds more believable, honestly.
This is
Did I
going
mess
so
up this name
appropriate
already?
for Serenity. Oh.
It already sounds like a fake name, so I feel like I messed it up.
Yeah,
So
you're all
is
right.
Is it Baker Dill?
Yeah. No regrets.
So, fisherman Baker Dill receives strange visions. Businessman Reed Miller is chasing after Baker after urgent news. Baker's ex-wife, Karen, suddenly appears and tasks Baker with killing Frank, her abusive husband. Baker arrives to have a telepathic connection with Patrick. I feel like this synopsis is already poorly written, so I'm not going to go farther than that. So there you go.
Yeah. So we should say the guy who's like always trying to like run into Baker Dill in this movie is played by Jeremy Strong. Jaimon Hansu is his first mate. Matthew McConaughey, we mentioned, is the fishing boat captain. He really wants to catch this fish for some reason. There is this like sort of like weird bond he has with the kid, with his son, who he hasn't seen in years. And then, yeah, Anne Hathaway plays his ex-wife. And Diane Lane is in this movie as, I guess, he's like her gigolo in this.
He's definitely a gigolo. Which,
when he needs money,
I have a lot to say about that.
They have some lovemaking, and it's, you know, with the money it's pretty gross, but without it's pretty great. There's also a cat, a black cat. What about you, Charlie? We're not doing a great job of describing this film, I have to say.
I mean, this is the best way to describe it without its spoilers. Like, this is the best way to describe the movie. It's like Old Man in the Sea, except drunker, and nothing makes any sense. Oh man. Matthew McConaughey wants to catch fish and he can't, so he drinks and yells at Jimon Hunsao and then goes to a bar and then goes and finds a cat and brings it. He never
pulls
takes
a
it
knife
back
out on
time.
people when they're like, "Hey, we paid you $700 to fish here," and he's like, "I'll cut you." Like, what? You're not going to cut these people,
John. It was justice.
That's my two favorite lines from this movie are probably, "We haven't been able to catch any fish since your wife died." That is a classic. And where can I get me some of that $10 ass?
Oh, I forgot about that scene until you just brought it up.
What a script.
Oh man. But it all makes sense. I'll argue for it later. It all makes sense.
It all makes okay, yeah.
Can I read some of my favorite lines?
Please, we're all ears.
I'm a hooker who can't afford hooks. Or, I'm a hooker who can't afford hooks.
I did a double take at that line. I was like, please, somebody else in this theater knows what I'm going through right now. Because we didn't mention this, but this is like a noir film. It has like a noir attitude. Like you're watching something out of the 40s. And it's weird in that way, but it's also idiosyncratic. I don't know.
I also enjoyed He's Dead in the Water. Forget when they said that, but I wrote that in my notes.
The best line in the film is just anytime Anne Hathaway says "daddy."
Oh
man! I kept wondering if Jordan Peterson.
Honestly, it was like, ugh.
I kept wondering if Jordan Peterson was going to like show up on screen whenever she did that. There were some awkward moments.
I don't get that reference.
You don't get that
Okay.
reference? Well, we'll ask you. And that reference comes to us from ContraPoints, the best YouTube channel that exists. So I'll send you your homework later.
I don't like this trail, but I'm going to go down it.
I brought this up with you earlier this week, actually. Yeah,
I know you did. And that's why I'm not going to go down this trail.
Anyway, so okay, was there anything you wanted to bring up, Charlie, in terms of moments in this film that kind of caught you off guard before we get into spoiler stuff?
I mean, the whole movie caught me off guard in the best way. I mean, every single thing that happened, which I think all makes sense now, but before you know what's going on, before any of the spoilers, it's kind of like, what is good? Because like the hooker who can't afford hooks line, when that happened, I was like, no, he didn't just say that, did he? Is that really what came out of his mouth? And you know, around every turn, and when he kicked Jimon Hunsao up for like, oh, your wife died, so you're bad luck, get away from me. Like all of these things caught me so off guard. And like I looked at my buddy JC multiple times, like, and both of us, our jaws were just dropped. Like, what is happening right
And
now?
Jason
And like,
Clarke. Jason Clarke playing the most abusive stepfather in Hollywood history.
oh,
Like, what was
he
that?
was worse than like the stepfather from The Stepfather. Like,
Oh yeah.
oh man, yeah, Daddy wants to catch a fish, doesn't he? Oh my god.
I gotta say, for a split second, like I think for like a scene and maybe a scene and a half, like I was like, I thought for a second that Jason Clarke was Joel Edgerton. I was like, this is a weird turn for Joel Edgerton. Like I did not expect. And I was like, oh wait, this is Jason Clarke. Okay, all right.
It was like Jason Clarke night for us because like the last two trailers before the movie were movies starring Jason Clarke.
Oh really?
And so then I told JC, oh, Jason Clarke's
So
in this
Pet
movie too. This is weird.
Cemetery.
There's Pet Cemetery and the one with Keira Knightley and Alexander Skarsgård.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the boy.
Aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah, they were all like it was those two and then the movie. It was like all the Jason Clarke I could handle all at one time. It's like I need to go watch Planet of the Apes now, I guess. Like it's just this is how this night has gone.
The Dawn Jason Clarke.
But okay, this is a weird one, and there really isn't much else we can say without really spoiling, like, what contextualizes this movie. But before we jump into the spoiler zone, starting with you, Will Ashton, do you recommend this movie? Like, and I would imagine, I'm going to predict that you're going to say, for some people, it's worth a watch. For some people, it isn't. I think that's probably the logical choice, but can you get into some detail on that? And yeah, but because I have a feeling a lot of people are listening now, they're going to stop listening because they don't want to hear the spoilers. For those people, what would you say to them? This is your chance.
Are you taking my job?
I'm literally asking. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sir. I would say if you expect a good movie, no, don't see this film. Like if you expect any film of any critical merit, I would not see this film. But I would say that if you want to have like a fun time and you didn't hear any spoilers until this point, which I mean, if you're like, okay, it's gonna be like a stupid, silly movie with two A-list stars doing a film that's below their pay grade, then sure, yes, I would 100% say like if you want a film that's like Welcome to Morrowind crazy, 100%, yeah, check this out. It's gonna be out of theaters pretty soon, so get your tickets now, I guess. But yeah, I would say if you want something silly in that regard, then check it out. But otherwise, if you expect a good film, then no.
I would say if you want to watch this is to me one of those so bad it's good films, in the sense that it's only worth checking out if you can, watch it with some friends, for example. If you can maybe watch it while drinking and like having a good time, even if you're watching it sober and laughing at it with your friends, whatever. Like it's a good bad movie night kind of flick, in the sense that it's so out there and it swings so hard. For people who appreciate the swings and consider it good for those reasons, that's great. But for most people, I think that they're going to come out of it being like, that was the worst movie I ever saw. I'm so glad I saw it. That's my takeaway. But what about you, Charlie?
See, I'm on the other side of this fence. I think this movie is actually good. I think it's very good because I think everything in context, which we'll talk about, like when you think back through everything that was like bad about the movie, it all makes total sense and it's all very, very intentional, in a weird, terrible way. Like Stephen Knight did exactly what he wanted to do, whether for good or bad reasons. So I think it's actually good and that people should watch it, but I think they should watch the trailer first. This is one of the only times I will say watch the trailer first, because the trailer
why is that?
It paints such a different picture.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I get what you're saying in one regard. Like, as I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, what's up with this? And then like the twist answers it in one regard. Mm-hmm. But like as I was watching, it's like, then wait, like I have 50,000 other questions as I'm watching this movie now because of that twist.
We'll address it. We'll address it. We'll We'll argue about it later. But okay, that is your drop off point. Let's do our grades so that if you don't want to get spoiled, you can stop listening. My grade is an I, which stands for incomplete. Not the film is incomplete, but I'm incomplete. I am not a whole enough person to assign any sort of grade to this film. The first time in Cinemaholics history, I'm not grading a film. I refuse to, because this film, to me, is not gradable. There's no criteria I can grade it against. I will say what my opinion is on it, and I will describe it to people, and I will do my best to inform our listeners, who I think will probably get the most out of this. But in terms of A, B, C, D, F, I can't. I am not capable enough to do such a thing. So for where I have failed in this regard, Will Ashton, what say you?
For me, it's not quite there. Only since it's not quite a Room or Birdemic quite disaster. Where I'm like, I can't grade this on objectable terms, or like a Neil Breen movie. It's like I can't logically assess the movie on that regard. I think for me, it's like objectively, I feel like it's like a C-, I guess. But I can understand where you're coming from, where quality-wise, and as far as my experience of film, like I had a blast watching it, so like I was entertained. But I mean, I can't say that it's a good film by any stretch of the imagination.
And then Charlie.
See, I feel like I've been in the kind of the same. I even commented on your review, John. I feel like I'm in that. I don't know how to grade it after I saw it, but I've literally thought about nothing but Serenity for the past 2 days. And the more I think about it, like I'm just going to go out on a limb and I'm just going to go with my heart on this. I think Serenity is great. I'm going to give it a B+ because I think that everything is so intentional and executed for better or for worse, exactly how it was intended to be. And if you buy the twist, it's an awesome movie.
I respect it.
This is why
this is my hill I'm dying on.
I respect it. 100%. I'm not being ironic. I 100% respect it.
This is what we live for on Cinemaholics. So I am so curious to dive into your brain for this, Corey, or Charlie. Oh no! I knew I was gonna do it. I knew it. Oh man. Okay, so spoilers from here on out. If you do not want to be spoiled on Serenity, and I don't think you should, I at the same time, I can imagine if you know the spoiler going into this, you probably still can maybe get something out of it. But it is one of my favorite movie experiences, is sitting in this movie and just realizing what it is, right? And I know some people have said that they see the twist completely coming, a mile away, and they still get a kick out of it. I've seen that a few places. So I won't say that it will ruin your experience, but I do advise you to go in as fresh as possible, because I did, and I'm glad I did. So spoilers from here on out. Let's talk about Serenity. Spoilers lifted. Now, Charlie, I want you to try to explain this, since you are the one who is going to defend this twist and how it, for you, justifies all of those terrible things we were talking about. We didn't go into detail, but we're about to. What is this twist, and why did it improve the film, in your opinion?
All right, so this is the craziest thing I'm ever gonna try to put into words. I don't know how I'm gonna even do it. So the whole movie's not real. There's teases early on that something bigger is happening. I thought for a while it was some kind of afterlife situation. Kind of. I had Black Mirror's San Junipero stuck in my head for a long time when I was trying to figure out what the twist was. I was thinking something along those lines. But basically, we mentioned Patrick, his son. Matthew McConaughey's character is not real. He died in Afghanistan, I believe, in
Iraq,
war.
I think.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Iraq. Yeah,
he died in the Middle East at war, and his son, who was very introverted, very socially uncomfortable. He's very brilliant, a gifted programmer. He basically takes this fishing game and reprograms it to add his dad in as a character. And that's how he copes with his dad's death and feels close to his dad. He basically created his dad again in this computer, and everything happening, the businessman chasing him is the rules, because in real life, Patrick's mom, who really is Anne Hathaway, is getting abused over and over and over again by his new stepfather, Jason Clarke. He's also getting abused by Jason Clarke, who does not understand him at all. And he is trying so hard not to he's trying to escape the world, but he can't. So he's kind of coping with real life by writing his scenario into his game. And he writes this scenario into his game by his dad being the hero and killing his stepfather, basically freeing his mother and himself. And as that twist is unfolding, we see it cuts to Patrick in real life back and forth. And as McConaughey finally kills Jason Clarke in the game, Patrick goes and stabs his dad or stepdad in real life because he's been abusing his mother for years and tries to free him. And we kind of see that Patrick gets, he gets let off because his mom said it was self-defense and all this stuff. And then he makes a new game and rewrites it so his dad can be together, because him and his dad can be together, because in his mind, this is where his dad exists, because his dad no longer exists in the real world. And it's a great commentary on our connection to technology and also coping with loss and how different people attack different things. And it's a crazy, ridiculous, weird twist. But if you buy it, it really lines up the whole movie and really makes the whole movie all make sense. But it is just, I tried to figure out what the twist was the whole time. I wish I didn't even know there was a twist, because I would have been shocked. But if I didn't know there was a twist, I probably wouldn't have seen the movie. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. But it is one of the weirdest, most ridiculous twists I have ever seen in a movie, and I am totally here for it.
Yeah, I will say the part of the twist that I saw coming was I was convinced it was St. Elsewhere, in the sense that it was Patrick's mind. Like, what we were seeing was a fantasy. I did not see it coming that it was a video game. Like, that completely caught me off guard, because who plays a video game for fishing? Like, that just, to me, a big issue I have with the twist is that it's kind of dumb that a kid would create like a fishing video game. Like, there's something about it. That's, again, why I wanted to see with this Maverick Hines. He is the most enthusiastic fisher I know, and I think he would have gotten a real kick out of that. Regardless, exactly, I do want to say, I haven't been able to say this because it sort of spoils the film, maybe to some people, but my alternative name for this film is Bandersnatch. I don't know. Is that okay? I know Will hasn't watched Bandersnatch, so I don't think that.
I've watched way too much Bandersnatch.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think Will could like fully appreciate that. No, but anyway. But okay, so that is the twist. It tries to like explain, oh, the dialogue was weird because the characters are NPCs. Like, everything is ridiculous because it's the mind of a child. And also, like Will said, it raises so many questions. It's kind of like the Cars universe in Pixar, where it's like the more you think about it, the weirder it gets. And like the more implications, kind of disastrous implications, it can start to have. And I think you're right, Charlie, that you really do have to just sort of buy into it. Because if you don't, if you keep questioning it, if you're too much of a skeptic, maybe, it's hard to sort of appreciate what this film is saying about the moral quandaries of, is it okay to murder your stepdad if he abuses your mom?
Right.
I don't know. I thought we addressed this in You, the new series on Netflix, but I don't know. But Will Ashton, what about you? I want to hear your thoughts on this.
100%. Yeah, I feel like there was a moment, to Charlie's credit, where like after the movie ended and I saw the full picture of what Stephen Knight was trying to do with this movie, where maybe it wasn't immediately after, but like maybe an hour after, was like, wait, is this actually a brilliant movie that I'm not taking full appreciation of? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, but like, this is not the Truman Show. Like, this is not like a movie where it's like actually commenting on real life in like a way that's actually meaningful and powerful. I'm sorry, like I don't mean to like you take away from anything you.
No, not at all. This is one of the only times when it's like, I'm going to argue that it's a fantastic movie, but if someone argues against me, I don't think they're wrong.
Right.
I believe it to be great, but at the same time, like, I completely respect and understand thinking it's a bad movie. I will fight for it, but I get it.
No, I just mean that, like, if somehow this movie helps somebody in some way, like, I don't want to like take away from anyone's appreciation of this film in any way. And if there's some, like, considering this movie deals with abuse, like, I don't want to take anyone's meaning of this film away from them, but like I just don't get it. Like, I don't know what Stephen Knight was thinking. Like, oh, like a 13-year-old kid is going to make a video game that's based on 50 noir cliches. Like, oh, and Anne Hathaway is going to have a mole because she's like obviously a female fatale. And it's just like, oh, we're going to have all these cliches. And like, it feels to me like he was like in some kind of Ernest Hemingway type like some kind of bet with like another writer where he's like, you lost this bet, like, so you're gonna have to make this movie where you have to make a thriller, like a erotic, sexy 90s type thriller where you have to deal with fishing, murder, and video games. Like, good luck. I hope you make your movie fine. And it's like, how am I gonna deal with that? And it's like, okay, I guess I can kind of get like the murder aspect. Okay, that's fine. I can get behind that. Fishing, okay. Like, he has to like throw the person overboard. Fine. How do I get the video games into it? Right. It's like, yeah, like the old man the sea thing. Like, I don't know if it's one of those things where, because Stephen Knight, I think he's a fantastic writer. Like, I don't want to dispute him, and I do think like he has some smart ideas going into this film. And I feel like he has proven himself to the point where it's like, okay, I can see why producers and maybe Matthew McConaughey, and I will say, Matthew McConaughey, a lot of his films deal a lot with spirituality in a way, like even films I don't think are good, like Sea of Trees or a film I actually think Interstellar is good, but a lot of people don't think that's good. Like, I think those movies deal with spirituality in a way and family relationships in a way where I can see where, as an actor, like what he's trying to do with this film. But I don't think this film is good at all. I don't think this is a good script in any means. And I just don't think that what he was trying to accomplish or what Stephen Knight was trying to accomplish is any good. I just don't think it's a good film at all.
See,
sorry,
me,
Charlie.
No, you're good. I understand that argument. I respect it. What I'm looking at is maybe not the abuse angle as much, but as at the very real topic of what kids attach to and what young people attach to. And you look at this kid and you look at these crazy characters that are in this game. Like, that's all that kid knows because he doesn't have a father raising him. His lasting memory of his dad was fishing. That's the last thing he remembered with his dad.
Right.
And the only adult interaction he gets is the principals and teachers at school who, are kind of the moral compass there, I guess. But he doesn't really talk to them much. What he knows about adults are what he sees in movies and video games. That's it. Or his abusive stepdad beating his mom in the hallway, because we hear it multiple times in the movie. So like all the daddy lines and stuff like that comes from real life. And that's all he knows. And so when he writes these characters in this game, they are written from a perspective of all this 13-year-old boy knows about real life, about adults in real life. Like, it's so skewed to him.
Why would he base the movie so much in noir elements then? Like, why would he make a movie that's so much like a 50s noir film based on those elements? Like, I can get behind that if it was like, maybe, I don't know, like maybe because fishing doesn't seem super relatable to me, and I apologize if anyone, like, I know fishing is a big thing for a lot of people, including Maverick, our co-host, but like I just don't feel like that doesn't, like, I feel it's going to be alienating for a lot of people. I don't know, John, do you feel that way in any way?
I was thinking about this, and I really don't know. I was thinking of BioShock a lot with the noir. If sort of like this is how a kid views noir films. I also thought about like, Home Alone, where he's watching the fake, like, and my Tommy gun too. Like it is sort of like a noir through the lens of a child. That's not where this film loses me, though. I can totally believe that a kid who watched like a few noir films growing up would like have this sort of like weird fantasy world. That all makes sense to me. It's fine. In fact, there was a moment in this movie where I was like, is this movie amazing? Because of what Charlie is saying here, where it sort of is just like it pulls the rug up from under you. It reminded me of Mother a lot in the way it does that, where it's like, oh, it's nothing but metaphors. Okay. But where this film loses me is that it does that really annoying thing where it's like kids, video games, violence, where like the equation is he's obsessed with video games, but he's also super ambiguously smart. We're not going to say he's on the spectrum because that's not politically correct. Okay.
Right.
But, but
that's the only thing I could think about in that moment was where he, social anxieties.
Of course. But yeah, he's socially awkward. He's not a man, as Jason Clarke says in his fantasy or whatever you would call that. But he is going to stab and kill his stepfather. And the link between video games and violence is such a ridiculous myth. It's been debunked and disproven so many times, but it continues to be like a cultural truism. And I hate that Stephen Knight comes away with this sort of like, this is the message that I'm going to give to people. And like, we talk about film a lot from like technical merits, and that's all well and good. But if you're going to make a film where you're going to get a point across, I don't know what Stephen Knight is trying to say here, and that really frustrates me because, like, What are you saying exactly? Are you saying, because there's a moment where he kills his stepdad, but he gets away with it, and then he's like, I think I did a bad thing, Dad, and he's talking to himself, I guess, but maybe it's the metaphysical version of his dad. Who knows? But his dad is like, it's okay. That is deeply irresponsible. Like, no, like, movie, don't do that. Like, don't tell people who are dealing with abuse right now, who have a lot of options in front of them to deal with their abuse in a mature and responsible way. Not a mature way, I should say, but in a way that'll actually solve the problem and not ruin their entire life and cause them deep mental health problems, because that's what murder does. This film kind of says, you know what? It's a good thing that he murdered his stepdad, who the film kind of inconspicuously says that like is heightened and elevated by the video game. Like, Jason Clarke is so over the top terrible, and you get the sense that that's not really what his stepfather is really like. And I don't understand how I just watched a movie that allows that to be visible and be like, oh, maybe he just sort of killed his stepfather and he wasn't as bad as what the movie is saying, but he still killed him and that's okay? That's messed up, and I hate that so much. And that's all I can think about with this movie.
Yeah,
it just completely lost me.
If it was like a Lego movie type situation, I'm talking about the first Lego movie.
I was about to say, Jesus, Will. Like,
I know exactly.
What deleted scene from the Lego movie did you?
But there's
watch?
Okay, I'm gonna on a serious note, I don't want to trivialize anything that's like, you know, because we're dealing with some kind of serious stuff here. But like in Lego movie, like that movie deals with like, you know, a fantasy world and like a real world. You know what I'm talking about with Will Ferrell's like actual character. Like if they had separated that a little bit and like had like a conversation, you know what I mean? Like where it's like a little bit more serious, like a little more thoughtful. And this movie is so just like basic in that conversation that you're talking about. And as someone on the spectrum, I feel like if you're actually gonna have a conversation about that, I mean, yeah, honestly, like that's gonna be like a whole other matter. But I mean, like the movie is so like, if you're gonna have a serious conversation about really deep stuff, like you can't like just kind of like do this approach. Like you have to kind of go deeper than you're willing to go, which I don't think Stephen Knight was willing to do. So I feel like the movie is like at a kind of standstill right now, where it's like it wants to be kind of deep and methodical and like kind of like, okay, we're gonna be like thoughtful in this approach, but it's not. I don't think it's actually approaching this way, like the way it was doing. I don't think it's responsible at all, like you said, John. Like I think it's actually
I mean, the responsible argument, I think that's a different argument to be had, because on one hand, I'm like, maybe he just wanted to do something crazy, and this was it. He just had this wild idea, and this was it, and he wasn't going for more. But there are times when he goes for something deeper. And John, I see what you're saying, and I think that the more I thought about it, kind of the thing that I really gravitated towards was I don't think that it was violence is because of video games. Like from what it seemed to me, it was this. Okay, the video game, the rules of the game were trying to tell him not to do it. Like the video game was not a violent game. He was reprogramming it because he was so freaked out by his real life situation. And the game was so against it because the rules were trying to hunt him down and say, you can't, they were trying to block his code. Like, you can't do this. This is not part of the game. Stop. And he was really like in his own head. And part of, I think what it was trying to say was the balance of reality and of fiction and of being lost in the computer and in your own world. Because, you know, like this kid started getting the lines blurred. He had his dad here, and that's what really like started making it too much. You know, so by the end of the movie, after the twist, when the dad's like, it's okay. We all know it's not okay. But that's the kid telling, like, it's justifying it to himself because he's so sucked into this world that's not real, and it's harming him just as much as it's helping him. And we kind of learn and see kind of the dangers of, okay, if he's completely in real life and not in his game, Jason Clarke was talking about, I want him to go outside and throw a ball. Okay, not every kid needs that, dude. Like, that's not how every kid operates. Kids are different, and we need to help them learn and develop the way that makes sense for them. And for this kid, obviously that was with his computer, but at the same time, on the other end of the argument, this kid was too invested in his fantasies. His dad is gone, and he did not cope with that correctly, and it resulted in really weird real life consequences. And so he got lost in this middle ground, but he kept justifying it to himself because the game was telling him it was okay, which that was his creation as well. And it kind of really perpetuated this, like, there need to be conversations about, okay, where we're investing our time and our thoughts and our emotions, and where the balance is to be found.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking of during this, and I was annoying me that I was thinking about this, was how, when you actually look at people who have committed like mass shootings, there's one in particular who they tried to link his like video game usage. And what they found was like the game that he played all the time, I think it was the Newtown shooter. The game he played all the time was Dance Dance Revolution. Mm-hmm. And so like for years, there's been this argument that like the introverts who are on their computers all the time, who get sucked into these worlds, there is a story to be told about how sometimes, like, and us included, like, we can get so sucked into the internet or into communities that are not IRL, can't even say it, how we can sort of become these very toxic, hateful human beings that we wouldn't be otherwise. But to me, this film doesn't really lay that out. I think that it can incidentally lead you to sort of the interpretation you got, which sounds like it's positive and it's uplifting and it's a little bit more nuanced maybe. But I guess I'm thinking more for a lot of people who are going to watch this and take away something completely different. And I think that's what's really tripping me up and what's making me think like the film is so direct with like what it's saying, like in its sequence of events. And if you have to do so much work to get to the point where you're like, well, maybe it's not really saying that, it's saying this, and you kind of have to do a lot of extra work. I guess that's where I get tripped up, and I can't get on that same boat. But I understand where you're coming from, because like it was really that moment when he said it's okay, when the dad said it's okay, that I was like, no, it's not okay. Because I was waiting for the film to reckon with what it was doing and to sort of say, because if he had killed his stepfather and from there the film had been like a cautionary tale, or it had been like, you know what, like this is what the film was, here's the takeaway. It was setting itself up for that, because it even had Jimon Hansu kind of saying like, you know, the deliver us from temptation. And like, you know, I'm not saying every movie has to have a good ending that I agree with from an ethical level, but it was setting itself up for that sort of thing. And then at the very end of it, it sort of had this happy music swells kind of manipulative moment of like, this is a happy ending. And I don't think that jibes with the sort of like, it's not a happy ending, he's going to have to deal with this for the rest of his life. I don't think that that's really quite there. And that's why I can't get quite on the same train. But not even, that's my biggest issue with the film. But I have so many others that we haven't even touched on. Like,
again, yeah. I feel like my biggest question of all the questions I have in the film is, why did this 13-year-old have his deceased father be a gigolo part-time in this video game he created?
Why did he fantasize about his dead dad?
Yeah.
Boning Diane Lane. What is that about? I'm not
even talking about, like, not even Diane Lane, just why was he a gigolo? Like, and period. Like, why is he a gigolo? Like, okay, it doesn't make any sense.
I have a defense for this. I've thought about this one so much because that was one of my biggest questions leaving it. I don't look at it as, so part of me, and I'm going to get really weird here. Part of me doesn't completely think that the son like created every single thing his dad did, because I think like that there was a weird overlay like once or twice in the movie about like computer sentience and stuff. And I think that there was an element.
I was going to ask about this. Yeah,
that it was like the character's kind of taking kind of his own path and stuff as things happen in different situations. I mean, the kid was obviously programming the overall arc, but Diane, there was a time when the rules talked about the different games you can play, and you think about a video game. And I thought a lot about about point farming or coin farming or whatever you want to call it in a game. Say you're playing Fallout and you don't have enough caps to do a certain thing. Like, that you can continue to take scrap to the guy in Megaton, and you can keep going back and taking scrap. You know where to find scrap. You can take it to him and you can get caps for that. And Diane Lane's character was that. You brought the cat back to her, or you visited her. It was for sex in this thing. That doesn't mean you don't know what it was. It might not have been for that in the game from a real world perspective. But you accomplish a mission with her, and you get money. And from an adult's brain, when you're making the movie, it's like, okay, that's an adult thing that we all understand how that works. That's an exchange that makes sense. That is him getting coins to then continue doing his fishing expedition, because he, like, as a player, he ran out of coins. He had no more money to go on his fishing expedition. He went to this woman and talked to her, and now he magically has money to go continue to do that. That was just his way of basically coin farming to keep going in his quest.
But I feel like if you're going to comment on video games in particular in that regard, like, why not just have him be like a gangster or something? Like, why not have him be like being a mafia type dude or something? If you're going to comment on that directly, it feels like it's weird to do like this angle in particular. Do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Each time about the sex over that.
Yeah, it just seems like weird. Like, that feels like more like I'm a 60-year-old screenwriter who thinks like 60 noir or like 50 noir angle is going to be like the way I'm going to go for this angle. It just seems odd for me.
Yeah, because I was thinking if this was like a real kid, this would be Grand Theft Auto, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, this would be like a wish fulfillment fantasy kind of open world. And I guess it was so specific that it kind of threw me off. I don't want to count that as like a negative, but it was something that I couldn't shake my head off. Like, why is this kid playing fishing video games? And again, we don't want to insult our fishing enthusiasts, fans of Cinemaholics. We think you're fantastic, salt of the earth. But I guess it's not something that I can directly connect with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I look at it as like, okay, the fishing game is something appropriate for a 13-year-old. He can't play a shooting game. This is the game he's allowed to play on his computer because it's about fishing. And the mom recognizes that's how he connects with his dad. That's the thing in his mind. There's that.
Again,
sorry, go ahead.
No, again, the fishing thing is not what we're disputing. It's the gigolo thing. Like, why is he?
I was disputing both, to be clear.
Well, right. I was trying to go through point by point.
Right.
I have literally thought about nothing but this movie. So again, there's kind of two ways you can go with it. One, it's kind of the hyper realistic of like, okay, that's just what happens to the audience because that's what makes sense to us. But I look at this kid and I try to think about what he knows about how adults interact. And there was a couple of times in the movie once Jason Clarke had gotten to the hotel, specifically a conversation, I believe, with the lady that owned the tackle shop. And she was telling McConaughey, he was beating her or they had sex or whatever. They were going for hours. You could hear it through the walls and all this stuff. And I after that, I thought about that for a while. I'm like, okay, this kid, it was very clear he hears what happens with his mom and his stepfather. So it would make sense for him to hear the sexual part too. And he's a very, very, introverted kid. He doesn't talk to a lot of adults outside of his teachers at school, who Jimon Hunsao represents that, and he knows his parents at home, and he doesn't know much else other than the abuse and the sex. Like, that's all he can kind of reproduce from adult interactions. And so to me, it's like, okay, like, why is his mom so sexualized? Oh, because that's what his stepdad wants, and that's what he hears through the wall. Because when she talks to his real dad, she's not that person. He remembers the conversations with his real dad and his mom and how they went. And everything she does around Jason Clarke is very much, she is this hypersexualized being with him around. And I think that kind of translates to the relationship between Diane Lane and Matthew McConaughey as well, because it's like, I don't know how these grown-ups interact in a bedroom by themselves. Well, this is all I hear through my wall. So this is what makes sense to me.
So, and then obviously the cat symbolizes he had to go find the cat because the cat got lost, and his mom was like, "Go find the cat," and so he turned that into a fetch quest.
Maybe we took it differently. I thought the game was one that had kind of already existed, and he was going in and adding things and reprogramming a game that already existed. So
I was curious about that too. Yeah, did he build it from scratch? Because they kept saying things of like he's a genius, so it made me wonder. Yeah,
I think it was a game that existed, and like because find the cat and catch the coin. Like there were games that already existed within it, and he was basically kind of piecing it apart and adding his own thing into it. And that's why the rules was trying to find Matthew McConaughey, because it's like, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. The creator didn't plan this, because I was confused for a minute. Like, why would if the kid created the game, why then is the kid like, why can't he change the rules? He's the creator. Who cares? I think because he's not the original creator of the game. He became the creator of the game when he started changing everything and adding the storyline to it.
Yeah, I feel like for me though, I feel like if Matthew McConaughey was like the asexual character in the film, and like he was the one that just kind of like, so I mean it would be weird, but like if he was like I gotta get this fish or I gotta do this mission thing, but like and maybe if the other characters were sexual, that would make that theory make more sense. I just feel it's very weird that he personally would pick Matthew McConaughey, his avatar in the situation, and be the one that's like at least somewhat very sexual. Is just very odd to me. I just don't really get that logic personally.
Yeah, the way that I thought about it, for me, I'm with you there. Like that was the one thing I hung up on for a while, and I guess the way that I explained it I've only talked to like my own head about this. Like it is, that's what he remembers from he remembers his mom and dad's relationship, and that's what he thinks adult men strive for is sex. And so, because whenever Matthew McConaughey did anything sexual, it wasn't about sex; it was about getting to the next thing. You know, when he was Diane Lane,
yeah.
He got right up every time. When it was Anne Hathaway, he was like, okay, that's done. I beat him or whatever. You know, it was very like instant. Okay, this is over now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like he knows this is what adults do, but he's not necessarily comfortable with it himself. So when he was done, it was over. Okay, cool. This is not where I want to be, but I had to do it to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just feels like.
No, go ahead, Will.
It just feels like a lot of stuff makes sense on paper, I guess. If that, like, it feels like if you describe this, like, maybe that's what got Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey involved. Like, if you describe this on paper, it makes a little bit of sense. I just feel like in execution, it just feels very bizarre and like impersonal.
Well, I was going to say
the directorial choice. Yeah,
I was going to say gross, because my thing with this,
I didn't want to go that far, but yeah, sure, yeah.
I just think it's all gross, and like I get that it's supposed to be cohesive in this is what a 13-year-old, like the world of a 13-year-old is like this really messed up, dystopian sort of like he's modding a video game. I understand that. And he's going to like put himself into it, and his weird sort of half-baked interpretations of the world are in full steam. But I think.
But why would a 13-year-old's interpretation of the world be based on stuff that was outdated by the 90s?
Yeah, that part I can't reach you on that one.
Like I said, with the game, the specifics of the game, like I just think that's what the game was. I don't think he designed those things.
You think the game was noir to begin with, and
right?
Then he added other
things. Was kind of simple, and it was it was just a constant game of MacGuffins, like just like any video game. I've been playing the Metro series a lot, like getting ready for the new one, and it's very much like.
But did they establish that
story?
But did he establish that he did not invent the game? Because it sounds like the newscast is like he's like a IT genius, like a tech whiz that was like invented it from the ground up. So it feels like, as far as the movie's logic is concerned, like he invented everything from the ground up. He invented the fact that it was a video game about fishing and all this jazz. Like, so that's where it feels like this definitely feels like a 60-year-old screenwriter wrote this film.
Unless Stephen Knight is saying, "Hey, you have to be an IT genius to mod video games."
Or you have to be a 60-year-old to be as genius as I am to make a movie about noir elements about fishing and murder.
Well, Ashton, I think you're just.
I don't necessarily think that.
I think Will is just upset because he doesn't like video games.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's why I hated Ready Player One and gave it a B-, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you said it, not me, but
yeah, sure.
But yeah, no, I kind of see it like I think there was a line where they like Anne Hathaway was mentioning like his game and playing this game that he got. Like I feel like there was a line, I can't remember what it is, basically saying like it wasn't his game. It was a game that he was just playing into, and I guess I didn't take the connection of like, oh, he's an IT genius because he made a game. Just like, no, he's
it's
a really
more
brilliant
believable.
kid.
Yeah, it's way more believable that he added onto an existing game. But I guess that's where it loses me, is because
maybe
you
that's
can't
just
tell.
my headcanon.
Right. Well, you can't tell though. Then, if that's the case, like, what's him and then what's not? Because like his fantasy is being in the ocean naked with his naked dad. Because like it's things like that where I'm just like, once the film is like, here's what it is, I'm just like, well, this isn't the cover of Nirvana. Like, I don't understand why he's, like, there are some things that I'm like, that makes sense. Of course, a kid thinking of like a macho masculine dad figure would be like, I gotta take a shower, and like jumps off a cliff naked. Yeah, 100%. When I was 13, totally would have bought that. But then like other things like, your wife died, I can't catch any fish. It's stuff like that where I'm like, that doesn't seem human. And it bothers me that the implication is that he's so shut off from the world that he's this peculiar, I don't know. It all rubs me very wrong.
Yeah. Well,
I like to imagine,
I'm sorry.
I was going to imagine like, honey, dinner's ready. No, I got to program you being naked while your stepdad is viewing your naked body for inspections, and if there's anything imperfect and we have to do something about that, hang on 1 second, it's going to take 15 minutes. Like, it's just like, what is happening? Like,
well, I mean, because that's the real life that he knows. Like there are dudes that are that controlling and that horrible. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like I said, I think some of those bits of dialogue, we've all played games. I guess maybe not Will. I just learned this,
that's
but
true.
like there are
fair enough,
terrible lines in games where it's just like that. Like I'll go back to the Fallout analogy just because I've played that game more than probably any. And if you played a game like that, like sometimes they'll give you more like 2 or 3 options to respond to with, and you're like, I would not respond with any of these things. They're all completely asinine, but you just go with it because, especially if the game's a little bit older, if it was easy for them to hack into and do whatever, like it's it makes sense for them to have just a weird, terrible line. And I found that balance, and maybe it's only in my head. That's the only reason I can cope with it. But like, there's a weird balance of some of it's just a game that he was given, and some of it is his own creation. And there's a balance in there to be found. Like there's a line in there to toe between what's his and what's not.
I see a missed opportunity on that note, because there is a story there where you can tell a story about how decisions we make in video games, they can make complete sense and they won't violate our code of ethics because it's a video game. But when it comes to real life, the rules are totally different. That's where this movie works for me, is because like this idea of like the rules of life and the rules of video games, how do they coincide? How do you reckon with them, especially as a teenager? And, it doesn't have to be a message that fully coincides with my personal, hang-ups when it comes to like coverage of violence in video games, because that just to me is personally something that I wish people would stop, spreading misinformation about. But regardless, I do think there is a missed opportunity there. I think there is a cool story there. I guess this film just loses me because in the execution, it just raises so many bizarre questions that don't, once you answer them, to me, they don't improve the final product, because I still had to sit through this thing wondering what in the world I was watching. And we haven't even mentioned this, but this is one of those rare films where the big twist happens halfway into the movie. And there really aren't that many twists afterward. I mean, at that point, I can't imagine most people were thinking that the dad was like alive or something. Like, okay, you can basically, even if you get to that point in the halfway part of the film, you're like, okay, well, the dad clearly died in Iraq and like all that stuff. And like, but then they play it sort of as like a revelation later on. But for you guys, I mean, did the film lose steam for you after the big twist? Because for me, it did and it didn't, if only because like I was kind of sympathetic. I was like, well, they're doing this in the halfway part, I guess, because they're giving the film time to reckon with this earth-shattering thing. But then at the same time, I stopped caring about everything. And I already didn't care that much because I was like, nothing that I'm seeing matters. It's just sort of like a battle for this kid's soul, but it's looking like he's going to kill his dad. So I guess just take us to that part where he kills his stepdad. And then it does. And then so on. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm pretty much with you, John. I feel like if the movie is actually going to have a serious commentary on this stuff, I feel like they should push that more. For me, it was like, okay, at the 45-minute mark, it's like, oh, you revealed your hand. Like, wait, is this really what we're going to do with this? And then at the 65-minute mark, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess, okay, well, okay, yeah, this is what we're doing. Yeah, and then that raises so many questions. But at that point, I agree with you where it's like, I'm not fully invested in dramatic stakes of the film because I know there are no dramatic stakes. Like, this is all a video game. Like, this is not like anything can basically happen at this point. You can drive down the cornfield with your rum in hand, your bottle of rum in hand. And it's like, yeah, I guess you can do that. Yeah, because it's a video game. Why not? And it's like, yeah, it doesn't quite hit me as hard in that regard. And I feel like there's a better version of this film. If you really want to dive into that, yeah, and divide and go into the commentary on like if you're going to comment on what video games are and the commentary on what they do for society, there's certainly a better way to do it than this. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, it didn't really hit me in that regard for sure.
See, I do agree with both of you guys. I think like there probably was more. There was more to say. Like there was stronger cases to make, different things to say, and like there are other movies that'll do that. And I guess to me, this looked like Steven I had an idea, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going all in, and we're going for it." And I so appreciated the guts of that. But I loved the way the twist happened in a sense of like, you know, like I said earlier, I wish I didn't know there was a twist because it really would have shocked me. Because going into it, I was like, what is the twist? And the whole first half of the movie, I'm trying to figure out what it is. But then there's that conversation with the rules in the trailer where he's
my favorite character.
Yeah, the best character in the movie. And he's like, this is what this is. And I guess to me, it's like, from someone who watches so many movies, it's like, okay, this is probably like, this is crazy. But also I was kind of hanging on to like, but is that what's really happening? Like, because McConaughey, if there's, just like with Tom Hardy in Venom, this is very much like if these actors did not buy into this movie like does not work on a single level. If the actors don't completely sell out, and they did, they all were like, Jason Clarke especially was just like all in, and McConaughey the entire time, like he sold it. And so to me, it was like you've got this. If you're gonna kind of, I took that sentient line way too much to heart, but I was like, kind of, is this gonna be real? Is this gonna become real? Like, how real is it to this character? How real is McConaughey? Did the kid like somehow find a way to upload his dad's consciousness? Like, is this actually his dad thinking and feeling? And we got to see it play out. Like, okay, is this actually happening? And that kind of lasted for 10, 15 minutes. You're like, okay, this really is a video game. Well, then how's it going to end? And it, I think it really stretched itself out enough to the point where I continued to care throughout, because I think there could have been vastly different outcomes by the end of it.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to sort of end it. I'm emotionally drained at this point. I do want to read some of we asked you all on Twitter, what are your tweet size reviews of Serenity? Let's hear what the listeners had to say. First off, Corey Woodruff himself responded. He said, if they don't do a tie-in with Bass Pro Shops, this whole thing was for naught. I don't know if that's either a wordplay with nautical or like a tying a knot, but I'm not sure, Corey. Hawk Ripjaw, who I know has been on, he's been on In Ain't Ogre Till It's Ogre, said, I don't know if I understand movies the same way anymore. That's his review. AJ Caulfield, one of the first to submit a review, said, quoth the Gwen Stefani, this shit is bananas. She said, pros, McConaughey's commitment to the weirdness, Hathaway's dirty blonde hair, Clark's punchable face, butts for no reason. Serenity really puts the ass in asinine. Cons.
Can I
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say I for all the criticism I have of the film, I do think McConaughey gives a decent performance. That's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's fine.
I thought
Hathaway
he
and
committed.
Lane.
Yeah.
At least Hathaway and Lane like kind of know what they're, they're kind of, they feel kind of comfortable in their performance. Like you don't get the sense that they're like fighting with the actor between every take. They're just sort of like, yeah, I'm just gonna be like simple favor, but in a neo-noir Fisher film. Got it. I love it. And that's
Well, actually, on Corey's behalf, I was gonna read this little thing that I have, which was our conversation about the film, which is that.
Hold on, Will Ashton, because I wasn't done with AJ.
Sorry, yeah.
Because AJ's said her pros, which were mainly focused on Matthew McConaughey's, nudity, but then the cons were literally everything else. ... Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
You were gonna say, Will?
Well, Corey and I were talking about the how Diane Lane was convinced to do this film, which is that her agent was basically like, "All right, Diane, you're essentially playing a semi-wealthy widow who lives alone in a seaside house who pays a shirtless Matthew McConaughey your gigolo, Diane." Okay, that sounds in the agent. But your catch is your reality subverts in of itself at one point where you realize you're in a Bassmasters-esque video games altered by a 12-year-old, somewhat mimic your tumultuous life with a abusive stepfather. Oh, so you're in a video game, lady, who talks really strangely and makes tons of double entendres, is hooking up with a video game lead who's made to be a literal manifestation of your dead real father. So everything is controlled by this 12-year-old, and the main plot is him using a video game to contemplate if he's going to murder his abusive stepfather. So we'll pay you $15,000 to spend a week in a beach house, and to do this, everyone has turned down this. So are you going to shoot the film this week or not? I want the money up front deal.
But enough about Man of Steel 2.
Yeah. Sure. Oh man, I'm not going to step behind. No.
Yeah, can you Blake? Don't tell me this isn't a big step up from Martha. All right, like she was Martha. She's taken this job. It's Matthew McConaughey. It's Anne Hathaway. It's Stephen Knight on a beach for a week. That's a giant step up from the Zack Snyder DC world.
We didn't mention too is that this was on Plymouth Island, which doesn't exist. They filmed this in Africa. And the island itself was weird because it was like a combination of like the Bahamas and New England. So, and you mentioned Fallout, so I'll mention, the Fallout 4 DLC has that one island you can play on, right? Where it's like all foggy and all this stuff, and it's like a fisher town.
That's actually, I think, a Fallout 3 DLC. It's Point Lookout.
No, well, they have it on it's Fallout 4.
It's a very similar one because there's a big foggy one in 3 I know what you're talking about. You are correct. There's one in Fallout 3.
Yeah. I played Point Lookout, but this one was way more Fishers of Men, as we would say. But anyway, we have other reviews to get to. DeWitt said he's looking forward to this one. Jay Fontana said, "Was this Interstellar 2? Now we are in a computer." And I like the first one with Nathan Fillion better. I'm actually kind of impressed with us because we didn't mention that this is an Interstellar reunion. Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway. This also is an
I thought a lot about it.
This is an Amistad reunion too, because Jimon Hansu, and he, of course, was in Amistad with Matthew
on a
McConaughey.
boat.
That's right. And we didn't even joke about Firefly, which was also named Serenity, about people on a ship named Serenity. Which to me, it's like you make this movie called Serenity, and the movie Firefly exists. It's been around for a decade and a half. How do you not say, let's call it something else? Let's call this movie something different?
I just think it was such a different movie that like no one. The only reason people are connecting is because they're seeing tweets on Twitter about a Serenity movie. Like nothing about it is the same, even remotely.
I think though, even if you never watched Serenity or knew what Firefly was, like it's all over Netflix. Like I see it all the time, and I've already, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it does seem like a weird, like I wouldn't, if I was
It
making a
seems-
movie, I wouldn't make it so close to something that exists and has that big of a profile. It's being like, my movie is called Avengers Infinity War, but it's different, everybody. It's like a spy movie in, underground.
Oh, I think it's one word, so it's kind of simpler. And also, like, if you called the movie Justice, we wouldn't watch it. So,
That's true.
yeah.
All right. Next episode of Cinemaholics, we're going to be workshopping alternative names for Serenity. But sorry, you were going to say something, Will?
No, I was just gonna say I feel like I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, I agree with you that I feel like you could change the title. Like, I mean, it's not like Serenity is like inchangeable. It's not too deeply into the plot, but at the same time, it's not so deep into the plot where it's like I don't think it's quite on the same level as Avengers Infinity War, where it's like, well, we can't change this, But
Obviously, I was being facetious, but yeah, I mean, if
I
your
know,
name
I know.
Serenity is a very bland name as it is, it works for Firefly because like that means a lot to the show, and it's like, oh wow, like Serenity is something that's like very integral to that show. It's a great way to sort of bring the movie about. But in this movie, what's serene? Nothing. I mean, like they barely even look at the water much.
Exactly.
I don't know. And then last we have Steve Carlson, whose Tree Size review was a lunatic vision that should not exist, but does. A pile of bad ideas that adds up to a singular accomplishment, an impossible object, a UFO, a wonder, a marvel, and McConaughey is so all in for it. So it sounds like Steve's right up your alley, Charlie. So we have to recognize where game meets game. Clearly, this is one that's working for some folks, and I'm glad that it isn't. I'm glad it was as interesting as it was. I'm glad I didn't watch a movie that was just nothing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it provoked a reaction, which, yes, that to me is a better situation.
game meets game, Daddy.
Game
Yeah, I think you're
recognizing,
right, John.
yeah.
I really wish this was like I so badly wish instead of moving it to January, they would have sold it to Netflix, because this could very well be a big Netflix movie. And if it was, it would be another Bird Box. It would be, everyone would watch it and we could talk about it with everyone in the world.
That's right.
And I would love that so much.
I'm surprised as many people responded to the Twitter poll as they did. So clearly some folks actually went out and saw this, and what does that tell you? But all right, that'll do it for this last call. We went a little long, but I'm glad we did, because it was, I think, some very insightful conversation, and a lot of that was because of you, Charlie. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your very deep and thoughtful takes on a film that did not deserve it in some opinions. Mm-hmm. But yes, thanks again for coming on. And where can people find all of your work and everything that you're up to?
Well, thank you guys for having me. Like, you and I have been talking for a while about trying to get on here, and I'm glad you're doing Serenity, because I was like, I can talk about this movie. I really want to. I'm comicbook.com all the time. That's where you can find a lot of my reviews and things, and I tweet them on my personal Twitter at Charlie Ridgely. And anything that has to do with the Music City Film Critics Association, we're trying to get that roll in the next couple of years, bigger and bigger. So anything they're doing, you can find me and my opinions in those places.
All right. We'll see you all back here for the main show of Cinemaholics. We're going to be talking about the Fire documentaries and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's going to be a jam-packed episode. Glad we could fit Serenity into this bonus, because it deserved the time and conversation. We'll see you all later from the Internet California. I am John Negroni.
For the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wash.
Oh, and from the Internet Tennessee, if I get to do that, I'm Charlie Ridgely.
You do? I was wondering, is he going to go for it?
I don't know if I'm allowed, but I guess I am. That's awesome.
We'll see you next time.